So the first big test of Ruben Amorim's Manchester United career has come away at Arsenal at the Emirates, where they lost 2-0 thanks to two corner kicks that resulted in the goals of Saliba and Jurrien Timber. Jurrien Timber getting his first goal for Arsenal. And in terms of a test from Amorim, how did he fare in it? Okay. I think it wasn't excellent, it wasn't bad. It was, I think, passable in terms of any real task for a new manager when they first come in is, obviously, they have the style that they want to see out on a football pitch. They have their way of playing. They have their perfect idea of a team. But when you walk into a team, you obviously could be walking into any group of players, considering what the last manager was like, what the recruitment system's been like. And so it's how you bridge that gap between where you're at now and where you want to be. And it's a lot of things that a lot of managers fail at, trying to come in playing too much within the identity that they want to see instantly without having the players to actually pull it off. And I think Ruben Amorim is doing a good job of so far bridging that gap. It's nowhere near where I think he'd like them to be. But I think he's mixing the style that he would like and that he wants to see eventually with what he's got available. And as a result, I just don't think that team is better than what Arsenal have. And, you know, they remained solid, they remained compact, and they kept Arsenal from creating anything really clear-cut, except from corners where Arsenal were dominant and could have easily had about 4 or 5 goals from corners. 2 on the money, as I say, that resulted on the 2 goals. And that was the only real weakness that United showed. There were some sloppy moments when they went down to 1-0 in their structure. In attack, it was a completely different issue. I thought they were really poor at points in attack. But that, sometimes you can only blame a manager for so much. It comes down to individual quality as well. And I feel like they let him down a bit in the attacking stage. But we'll go over the Arsenal attacking shape first of all. So in terms of where Arsenal managed to get the most amount of space, it was in those original build-up stages because they had such an overload with how United went to press. But as a result, in the defensive line, in that last line, United had the overload. And I think that was the game plan for both of these two teams. I think United needed the strength in numbers at the back and were willing to give up possession in Arsenal's deeper phases. Arsenal, I think, were looking to gain advantages in the deeper phases while leaving limited resources in attack because they had certain danger areas they needed to hit. So there was no right or wrong way that both teams handled this. I felt like they approached it in their own way and there was pros and cons to both of it. But Arsenal, as always, their shape is so flexible. And it's not just through numerical advantages that Arsenal gain ground in these areas. It's through rotations, it's through interchange of positions where they'll look to distort an opponent's pressing shape. And, you know, just to say, really disrupting it. And with those rotations, it would involve David Raya maybe coming in, spreading that back three out a little bit wider, allowing Timber to push into a more inverted position. Again, gaining that central overload. It would also be with Thomas Partey dropping in between the two centre-backs. Zinchenko moving from a left-back position to an inverted one. Sometimes Rice could come out into this area. Odegaard as well, given a bit more of a free role than most to sort of drop deep and receive the ball in these areas. He could even drop in a little deeper than Partey in some instances. And so how United dealt with that was just going to be through pressing shadows, energy and energy galore, and the right amount of discipline. Initially, Højlund would start on Partey with Garnacho and Mount sort of working from full-back inwards, and they wouldn't just drop off, they would look to go and engage. Ugarte and Bruno Fernandes would manage Odegaard and Rice, but again, the overloads and rotations that Arsenal would commit to would open United up in various ways. Saliba getting on the ball in deeper positions, maybe drawing the press of Højlund is huge because then that pass opens up into a Partey who's got free rein to turn and play forward, even if they drop up. And Mount then goes to maybe press Zinchenko if the ball goes over to this side. Ugarte can come in. And then if that passing lane to Rice isn't closed off, then that can be slipped through. And again, he's got space that he can move into. Fernandes would also have to cover around and make sure that they're trying to congest that area of the pitch. And to be fair to United, the shape in that front area of the pitch was good, and the energy levels they showed were a lot better than it has been at points. They weren't full press, they were a bit of a mid-block and just trying to congest certain areas of the pitch and be quick to react when Arsenal tried to move it around. But naturally, when you're that outnumbered, you're going to lose ground and you're going to have to concede possession at certain points and allow Arsenal to end up having to move further up the field. And again, where I think that the Amorim is still not set on this United team is what he wants to have done with the wide centre-backs. We've seen in the previous games how the wide centre-backs will look to engage players in this position, and whether this was a case of Arsenal's shape being too unpredictable, or whether it's because he didn't feel like he had the wide centre-backs available to go and commit to this, especially with leaving Harry Maguire exposed in the centre of the pitch, but they weren't as willing to come up into these areas to engage. The only time they do is if Kai Havertz would drop in and provide that extra man and even greater overload in these areas. Mazraoui would come in to engage with him. Very occasionally when you do that, sometimes Havertz would come out into this position, which would make it easier for Mazraoui to, again, engage and come over to this area. And it was about how United's remaining defenders could adapt and split around. Saka and Martinelli were the high options. They were staying wide and pinning the wing-backs back, which left this area of the pitch free for Arsenal to play into. So if Garnacho and Mount got pulled further up, then Timber, and if I just move these two in a little bit more narrow, and Zinchenko could receive these passes from deep, chip ball over from Raya, which has got a fantastic range to his passing, could find them in these areas. And this is the issue when you play this system without the wide centre-backs engaging, is this is space you will concede. Now, again, United thought having that back five would make it greater in those defensive areas if they had that numerical superiority, but Arsenal did get through a few times. But to be fair, their passing in these areas wasn't as good as it can be. It wasn't slick, it wasn't one touch. There was a bit too much time spent on the ball, too many touches taken in between passes, and those extra seconds can make it so much easier for United to recover and move across to markers and just cut off passing lanes. So Arsenal made it a bit easier for United, but United did their bit in these areas. But again, with the 7-on-5, that's going to create advantages for the team that has the 7. Naturally, that's how mathematics work. But United's wing-backs, and to be fair, the way they dropped off in these areas was really good. So Arsenal couldn't get maybe Saka or Martinelli into these areas inside full-back and centre-back as much as they'd like because of the width that United had with that back five. They prevented that pass in the channel, in the half space, and they weren't carved open. The only thing that Arsenal could do to hit Saka and Martinelli was by them stretching incredibly wide and the pass going so wide because of the way that Malacia and Dalot just pushed them into those areas, which obviously gains advantages and leads to them having a greater chance of winning corners, which obviously is a massive part of their game plan. But, if again, you'd rather concede it on the outside than the inside. And the few times Arsenal had sustained attacking pressure, they had United forced back into their sort of 5-2-3 shape. Again, just similar to what it was like in the more advanced stages. Odegaard and Rice pushing a lot higher up in the half spaces, Zinchenko and Timber coming in narrow to provide those triangles, to provide that just more comfortable base for Arsenal to play through and use their underlapping or overlapping runs to offer support to the wide players and trying to get them as one-on-one with the wing-back as humanly possible. Mazraoui, I think, coming into left centre-back was to provide a more athletic cover for Malacia against Saka with no Luke Shaw, with no Lisandro Martinez. He was deemed the best option, and as Mazraoui has done, did his job fairly well. No fuss, he's just a steady, consistent player. Also, this basing with Arsenal's shape gave a little bit more of a clearer range for the wide centre-backs to come and engage in these areas against Odegaard and against Declan Rice because of, let's say, just the deep nature and the compactness of United in these areas. Second half, once the first goal went in, they were sloppy and they conceded far too much ground in between centre-back and full-back and centre-back and centre-back. But Arsenal still did their bit really well. But until then, the shape was good and Arsenal really struggled to gain ground and get crosses into the box and get balls into the box, really. United's box wasn't penetrated unless it was a corner and worked relatively hard and did their bit. Mount could drop in and provide a base that made it a bit more of a 3 in there with Højlund and Garnacho offering the transitional threat. These are incredible work amounts, so he did offer Ugarte and Bruno a bit of protection. And Ugarte, I thought, was really good in these areas, showing his energy and winning the ball back as quick as possible. So full credit to him. But Arsenal, again, if you keep him outside, that's a greater chance for him to win corner kicks, and then that's just a danger for him. Like, they are the best set-piece team in the country. So those 2 corners were costly for United. But how did United try to attack the game? One of the changes that United made in this game, and that Amorim made, was in how he built up. We know that typically he likes the central centre-back to invert alongside the holding midfielder and allow more of a box shape in the front area to allow maybe Garnacho, whoever the sort of more pacier forward is, to push up alongside Højlund or whoever the striker is. And he did start this way. Maguire did it a couple of times, but we more often than not saw Bruno Fernandes dropping into this area here, with Maguire alongside Onana making it a sort of 4-2 in the build-up to try and overload the Arsenal press, who would go man-to-man, they'd go aggressive. You'd have Odegaard being the better presser and the more advanced presser than Havertz, who would drop in Ugarte. Partey pushing up into Fernandes. Saka and Martinelli on the 2 wide centre-backs. De Ligt finding himself in a sort of right centre-back position, a right-back position almost at points. And United would try and spread wide and open up the pitch as much as possible. And on the left side, it was complete man-to-man. Zinchenko pushing up into Dalot. Rice would drop in on Mason Mount. He wouldn't be one of the more forward pressers. He'd be more curious of the space in between the defence and midfield. If they went to the left, which is where Onana would typically angle himself with the ball to try and play through, just because of the angles that Odegaard was forcing him into, Arsenal would move up into more of a man-to-man press, where Timber would come up into Malacia, Saliba would follow Garnacho as he chose to show for the ball in these areas, and Kivior pressed onto Højlund. And United did have some success at points. Arsenal obviously fantastic in their press. Their defensive shape is one of the best in world football. But United dealt with these situations really well. And there was a few points when they would sucker him onto him. Let's say if Maguire took a goal kick, Odegaard would then come onto Onana. Maybe Havertz would back up the press. Partey would end up a bit more advanced than he'd like to be, and it would leave a bit more space in the midfield. If United could play around the Arsenal shape, and say Malacia moved inside, then Bruno Fernandes or maybe even Mazraoui, depending on the situation, could get in these positions, with Arsenal then maybe moving across to try and cover, and they could then play the switch over to Dalot or over to De Ligt into these areas who had space to run into and could potentially overload Zinchenko if they were quick enough. The problem is, when United got the ball in space, they weren't really quick with their play. They were a bit too easy to read from an Arsenal perspective. They weren't playing with any risk, they weren't playing with any courage, and as a result it felt like they took the safe option way too much. If Dalot received it here, there wouldn't be a give and go, it would be him playing it backwards and then De Ligt turning backwards to then play it back to the more defensive areas, because Arsenal would usually recover into shape really well. But those openings did get created, and I think Amorim can take heart from that, because that would have felt like part of the game plan and beating Arsenal's press. Also, they could go completely direct to Højlund, because on the right side, Dalot held the width in the more advanced areas, which allowed Mason Mount to come in a lot more inside, which again made it easier for Rice to mark him. With Malacia and Garnacho, Malacia would sit a little bit deeper as Garnacho would come in to the sort of left forward area to try and combine more with Højlund. Again, Saliba would follow him up when Garnacho did follow the ball, but he'd also be ready to use his body to prevent him from getting the run on him. But if the ball did go long to Højlund, he did hold the ball up well at points to try and find the runs of Garnacho in these areas, or maybe lay it off short to Mason Mount, or the shorter option to Bruno Fernandes if he charged up, who could then play that ball into Garnacho. And again, a few times where United did get into promising positions thanks to these quick moves with Garnacho, with Malacia, with Rashford when he came on the pitch, and even Bruno Fernandes when we need to get forward. But again, just that issue I spoke about on the opposite side, the real lack of courage, a real lack of risk in their play, and as a result it gave Arsenal too much invitation to drop back into space and recover well. They just didn't offer enough bravery within the play on the ball. The technical quality they have wasn't on show as soon as they got out of their own third, and it's a shame, because I felt like with a lot more quality on show they could have exploited Arsenal with Kivior and Zinchenko on that left hand side. That was exploitable, and it's maybe a missed opportunity from Amorim that he didn't play Amad Diallo, who's been fantastic at right wing back since Amorim came in. Mount and Dalot weren't going to test Kivior and Zinchenko the way that Amad's pace would, and his ability to run off of the markers who would lose concentration. So as a result, with the quality they had on the pitch, the left side was the approach for United, but they were dealing with the better defenders on that side, in Saliba, in Timber, in Partey as well, when he could recover, in Saka, who could drop in fantastically well, and that was shown even on the few times that United had sustained possession. Also, I realised I've had Højlund on 11 this entire time. He's now the number 9. My bad, didn't realise, maybe forgot to change that. Let's hope it's not mentioned in the comments at all. So, again, as I was speaking about Arsenal's defensive shape being that of the best in the world, that's in the mid and low block as well, not just in the advanced press and the man-to-man and the aggression they show and the way they can set traps, but the vertical compactness of this shape is key, and it allowed them to go a bit more zonally, with Odegaard and Havertz maybe marking the back three and shadowing the markers. Let's say if the ball goes in from Mazraoui, Odegaard can go and press while shadowing the pass into Mazraoui. Saka can maybe back him up as well. Partey and Rice could push on to Ugarte. And because of how compact the shape were, when they did go and press and engage with these two, the space between them and the back four was so little and so narrow that Mount and Garnacho could never really get the space and time to play and really hurt Arsenal. They were so disciplined. It meant that Saliba It meant that Saliba could react, it meant that Kivior could react, or Rice could move back in this area. Rice offered some fantastic protection on this defensively weaker left-hand side through his quick movements back onto Mason Mount, dropping in a little bit deeper if he needed to, and it was fantastic work from Declan Rice. It's the one thing, and I know I've been a bit critical of Declan Rice at points, but it's the one thing he's always been world-class at, is his ability in a compact defensive shape, his movement between his markers, his ability to produce a recovery run and tackle at the same time is world-class. And as a result, United just, again, didn't have the quality in these areas. Bruno Fernandes was kept out of the game with the movement of Thomas Partey. They would also drop Saka back into the back five to make it that, if that was what needed to be. Odegaard could drop into the midfield just to get more solid if there were combinations on that left-hand side, with the way that Garnacho holds width with Malacia and then Dalot in the second half when he moved over to that side. But as a result, United didn't really get in the box. Can't really remember Raya having to make a save of any real importance. And as a result, Arsenal keep their clean sheet. And, some good runs from Højlund, Garnacho having a few moments to open up, Rashford later on in the game as well, but again, nothing that they were combining with, no real quality that was ever going to open Arsenal up, and just real poor decision making at points. As I say, players getting to these positions, turning away from where space was or where the threat was to produce the easy pass, and making Arsenal's job easier. But Arsenal was still fantastic, take nothing away from them, and as I say, 3 points thoroughly deserved for him, you can't argue with it. But United, not terrible, and there's something to build on for Amorim. I think he'll enjoy the defensive shape. It's defensively as good as we've seen United in a big game for a long while, which is a bit of a sad indictment on where we've been, because we still lost 2-0. But I think he'll take something from that. But the attacking lack of quality, I think, will concern him more than anything. But that's just something he's got to work on, and that was never going to be fixed in a day. But I'd love to know what you guys think. Thank you for watching. Like the video if you like it. Dislike it if you disliked it. Comment down below. Tell me why either way. And subscribe if you want to see more. In a bit, lads.